We have been monitoring the Pentagon briefing within the last hour, and officials there have now confirmed that the U.S. has evacuated about 16,000 people from Afghanistan in just the past 24 hours. They also confirmed one Afghan soldier was killed, several others wounded in a gunfight with unidentified attackers there at the Kabul airport overnight. President Biden saying the evacuation mission could now keep U.S. troops in the country past that August 31st deadline. But the Taliban is warning that an extension would cross a red line and, quote, provoke a reaction. Meanwhile, at the airport, deteriorating conditions, including brutal heat and a shortage of food and water, have caused at least one family to leave after 4 days of waiting for a flight. Thousands of people, as you can see, have packed that airport in Kabul. At least 20 people have now died trying to reach safety. Now the Pentagon has ordered 6 commercial airlines to try and help evacuate more people from the region. We are learning one of those flights landing this morning at Washington's Dulles Airport. ABC's senior Pentagon producer and reporter Louis Martinez joining us now from Washington. Louis, as we were monitoring this briefing, you really got right to, I think, what everybody has been asking and what everyone is very concerned about right now, and that is a humanitarian crisis. You see these pictures and you hear about the deaths. Now you're hearing about violence breaking out from unidentified attackers. Do you think you got a good answer, Louis, with regard to security and just getting these missions accomplished without any more death or devastation from what we've seen so far?
Well, Kara, it's a difficult question to answer because we are seeing the situation play out in our living rooms. We are here in the United States. This is the reality for people who are trying to escape, to have entered into that compound there at the airport. As you mentioned there in your remarks, there's a humanitarian situation that's really brewing there because there's a lack of supplies, there's a lack of water. When I asked that of spokesman John Kirby and of General Hank Taylor, what they came back with was there are aircraft. Those aircraft that are taking people out are also bringing in supplies. That's a valid answer. Is it enough, though? That's the real question. Is there enough to supply what is an ongoing churn? At some day, you had 16,000 people leave in one day. That means there were 16,000 people at that airport just yesterday. How do you get, and if so they're waiting for days, do you have enough supplies to get to all of those individuals? And in that case of that one family that you spoke about, they chose, it was essentially a Sophie's choice. Do we tough it out in here with little children, or do we go back outside knowing that there will be more access to supplies there? And that's a difficult choice. Spokesman John Kirby said that it is not lost on anyone here at the Pentagon and in the U.S. military, the concerns about these individuals, the hope to help them as much as possible and to be providing them with as much supplies as they can. But the question again is, how much can they provide?
So, Louis, when you see these pictures from the airport there in Kabul and the thousands of people lined up and spending the night there trying to get out, I mean, give us a reality check here. If they wanted to leave and go back to where they were living, is that safe? Is that an option? Sort of explain the dynamic to us. Or is it a situation where they are fleeing and this is their only option, and if they don't stay here, they can't go back?
Kira, I think for many of the individuals who you're seeing on your screens right now, that is the case. These are individuals who worked with the United States for the last 20 years. They are bringing their families. Over time, when it's at some point potentially, they probably experienced some type of harassment by Taliban supporters. But that's different. What's different now is that the Taliban is in control. And we're getting all these reports from across the country, essentially, of individuals who worked with the United States who are being sought after by Taliban groups. You heard Stephanie Ramos ask the president about this one individual that we had interviewed a couple of months ago. And his situation was so dire because he took a picture of Taliban fighters emerging from a pickup truck just a couple of floors down from his apartment. Luckily, he was able to flee, and remains in contact with us. But the situation that he experienced is pretty much could be replicated by so many of those individuals who are at the airport right now. So there is a real fear and it is valid in some cases. But the reality is, how can you get all these people out in a certain way, especially because you have this August 31st deadline? And as you heard from some of the questions that were being asked there, it sounds like priority is now being given to Americans like just this weekend, were told not to show up at the airport because of security reasons. And I must add now, we did have a bit of breaking news here at this briefing, because Kirby did pretty much confirm we have been asked why, if the British and the French are going out to bring in their citizens to the airport, why doesn't the U.S. do it? Well, he confirmed that that has happened on occasion. Not just the one helicopter event that we learned about last week, but now a second helicopter event, and then additional incidents that he described. He did not want to go into detail for security reasons. So that is very interesting, very brand new here.
All right, so let's talk about that August 31st deadline, because I was listening to the reporters, I was listening to the response from the general and also John Kirby, and they really weren't responding. They were saying, we are sticking by that August 31st deadline. We're going to continue these missions to evacuate. However, President Biden, as you know, this White House has come forward and said we might have to extend that deadline. All right, reality check here.
The president seems to be more flexible than what we're hearing from the Pentagon. That's essentially it. Yesterday, he said there might be discussions about going beyond the August 31st deadline. Today, from the Pentagon, we heard there are no discussions, that we are focused on August 31st. They don't want to give any latitude. Maybe the concern is about the Taliban. I don't know that it's necessarily about that spokesman who's getting a lot of, quote, action today, saying that that's a red line. I think it goes more towards other security threats inside of Afghanistan, particularly ISIS. We heard the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, say yesterday that there is concern about an ISIS threat. We know that ISIS in Afghanistan is responsible for most of the deadliest deadliest attacks against civilians inside Kabul and outside and in the rest of Afghanistan. So the concerns expressed by Jake Sullivan, I think, are real. And so I think maybe as part of the security concerns that they have here at the Pentagon and at the base, that's why they don't want to tip their hand. So I think maybe that has a part to do it, has partly to do with this, why there seems to be this disconnect and why the Pentagon seems to be so firm that we're just focused on August 31st. But you've heard it from the president himself. It sounds like he is flexible to the idea of giving more time to get all of the Americans out that need to get out. And by the way, you heard something new today as well. They are now no longer giving an estimate for how many Americans have been taken out. They're being specifically vague, keeping it to several thousand.
Okay, so let's talk about the Taliban. So one thing that caught my attention, John Kirby said there are talks that take place a few times a day between the U.S. and the Taliban. What do we know about those discussions and what's coming out of those discussions?
Sure. So what's happened is that beginning last week, the 82nd Airborne flew in one of its full brigades. That requires a lot of coordination. You had the Marines that were there. So the Pentagon sent in the two-star commander of the 82nd Airborne to be in charge of the overall operation at the airport. He's working for a two-star admiral. What has happened is that general is in regular contact with a Taliban counterpart, a senior commander, and they work on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times, in coordination of where are we, where are you, what you heard Kirby call deconfliction. It's also taking place at a lower level, what here at the Pentagon they call the tactical level. So if there's a local commander on the ground and he sees something, then they establish a line of communication. This is really important because you want to avoid potential incidents that could become very serious or misunderstandings. This is something that a week ago would have been extraordinary. It is now taking place regularly, multiple times a day, and to ensure the safety of both sides. And one of the questions you heard was, if we're going out to get Americans, are we doing this in joint patrols? And you heard Kirby emphatically say, no, that is not the case. But I am sure that there's probably been some coordination about, hey, we are going out to do this, just be aware that we're doing that. But again, something that would have been unimaginable just a week ago, and it's taking place really on a regular basis right now over there at the airport.
And not to mention heart-wrenching to just see those kids and those families, Louis. ABC News senior Pentagon reporter, producer Louis Martinez with us from Washington. Appreciate the insight and always the great questions at the briefing. Thank you, Louis.
Thanks, Karen.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.